In the quiet town of Willowbrook, where the sun cast gentle rays on cobblestone streets and time seemed to slow down, the courthouse stood tall and stoic at its center. Its weathered facade was marked by years of service, embodying the essence of a community steeped in tradition and a steadfast commitment to justice. This venerable structure, with its grand columns and soaring clock tower, was not merely a building. It was a sanctuary of law, a bastion of justice that had seen its fair share of stories unfold within its hallowed halls. Presiding over these tales was Judge Richard Harper, a figure synonymous with integrity and authority. His courtroom, a place where lives were altered and destinies decided, reflected his unwavering dedication. Within the confines of his chambers, shelves brimmed with thick tomes of law, each one a testament to his hard-earned knowledge. The air was heavy with the solemnity of family portraits that gazed down with watchful eyes, reminding him of the legacy he bore and the weight of responsibility that came with it. Judge Harper's stern visage was a visual representation of the seriousness with which he approached his role. His gavel, a polished instrument of his office, struck with a swift and decisive authority that left no room for doubt. His verdicts were unyielding, his righteousness unmistakable. One unassuming afternoon, amidst the usual routine of the court, a seemingly minor infraction brought an unexpected case before his bench. The defendant, a young black woman, stood nervously before him, having been caught jaywalking, a violation of the town's pedestrian laws. In the past, such a misstep would have garnered leniency, perhaps a simple warning coupled with a lecture on the importance of public safety and adherence to the law. However, on this particular day, something within Judge Harper stirred as he regarded her. An inexplicable urge welled up within him, compelling him to make an example out of her. He leaned forward, peering over the rims of his spectacles, his sharp gaze piercing through the steely atmosphere of the courtroom. His voice rang out, firm and unyielding, as he announced her fine with a mixture of authority and finality that reverberated in the room. The air became charged, saturated with tension as the audience held its collective breath. Time seemed to suspend itself. The sound of a typewriter in the corner clacked methodically, echoing in the stillness like a metronome counting down the seconds of her uncertain fate. Each sound emphasized the gravity of the moment, highlighting the quicksand of justice that she now stood upon. Whispers began to spread through the packed gallery, eyes darting between the judge and the young woman. The fine, delivered as if it were a death knell, reverberated beyond just a monetary penalty. It loomed over her future like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow her with its weight. In this small yet pivotal moment, the courthouse of Willowbrook bore witness to a complex interplay of justice and discrimination, a snapshot of the societal struggles that persisted beneath the surface of everyday life. As the judge returned to his duties, the dusty books in his chambers bore witness to yet another story, another facet of humanity that unfolded in the pursuit of justice. Imperfect, yet undeniably real. The woman, dressed in a simple blouse that flowed softly over her figure and a skirt that barely brushed her knees, exuded an unassuming elegance that was both refreshing and disarming. Her attire, seemingly ordinary, stood in stark contrast to the electric tension that surrounded her as she met his gaze with a calmness that felt almost rehearsed, as if she had anticipated this moment with meticulous preparation. There was a quiet strength in her demeanor, a certainty that suggested she was more than just another face in the crowded courtroom. With a graceful movement, she reached into her purse and retrieved a crisp bill, paying the fine without the slightest trace of protest or complaint. Her eyes remained locked onto his, an intense, unwavering challenge reflected back at him. It was a bold confrontation that sent ripples through his composure, leaving the judge to grapple with emotions that stirred in his chest: disdain, curiosity, and an undeniable awareness of her presence. She had not merely come to resolve a matter of law. She had come to make a statement, to assert something between them that he felt but did not fully understand. As she turned to leave, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished wooden floor of the courtroom, a sound that echoed like a metronome counting down the seconds of his thoughts, Judge Harper felt a peculiar mix of satisfaction and unease pool together within him. There was something both final and poignant about that moment, as if he had just witnessed the closing act of a performance he hadn't even realized he was a part of. Her departure left a lingering sense of tension that seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog, closing in around him. Only moments later, as the courtroom emptied of spectators and the murmur of conversations grew distant, blurring into a soft hum, a young clerk approached the bench, her face flushed with excitement. She appeared almost breathless, her eyes wide with an urgency that spoke volumes. Without pausing to catch her breath, she held out a piece of paper to Judge Harper, her voice trembling with the weight of the news she bore. "Your Honor," she began, her tone imbued with a mix of reverence and urgency, "I think you need to see this." The document she presented was a brief, simple, yet charged with revelations that made his blood run cold. As he scanned the contents, a knot twisted in his stomach, every line enveloping him in dread. The woman he had just fined, the one who had stared him down with such unwavering confidence, was no ordinary citizen. She was someone whose reputation preceded her, a figure who wielded influence that could shake the very foundations of his world. The implications of her identity began to seep into his consciousness, each realization intensifying the sense of foreboding that had taken root within him, leaving him acutely aware that he might have stepped unwittingly into a much larger, more complex narrative than he had ever anticipated. The judge's eyes meticulously scanned the page before him, each word seeping into his consciousness like ink on paper, while his mind raced through a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The woman whose name was emblazoned across the document was not just any attorney. She was an accomplished legal mind with accolades and achievements that commanded respect. Even more significantly, she had recently ascended to the position of chief of police for the very town in which he served. This added layer of responsibility and authority painted a stark backdrop against which Judge Harper now found himself unraveling. A sudden knot formed in the pit of his stomach, an unsettling sensation that brought with it a profound realization. The power dynamics at play were far more intricate than he had casually acknowledged. He couldn't shake the thought that she could have easily recognized his nameplate, could have rolled her eyes in disdain, or laughed off his judgments as irrelevant in light of her position. The silence she chose, however, hung heavy between them, reverberating with an unspoken understanding that left him reeling. It was as if the reality of their respective roles had crashed down on him unexpectedly, like a wave sweeping over a shoreline, cold and unyielding, leaving no room for denial. As he wrestled with this new understanding, Judge Harper's thoughts drifted back to his own youthful days, when he was still a boy learning the ropes of his community. He recalled a time when the color of a person's skin often dictated the respect and dignity afforded to them. Growing up in a society riddled with systemic prejudice, he had prided himself on rising above these societal norms. He had envisioned himself as a beacon of fairness, a symbol of equality in a world rife with bias and discrimination. He had aimed to be an agent of change, an advocate for justice who believed in dismantling the very biases that had plagued his community for generations. Yet here he stood, unexpectedly ensnared in the very web he had diligently vowed to unravel. The woman's calm and composed demeanor, so poised in the face of his implicit judgment, now struck him as a silent rebuke. It served as a coping mechanism for the countless times she had likely endured microaggressions and subtle prejudices from those who were meant to enforce the law and maintain order. In that moment, Judge Harper felt an overwhelming sense of discomfort, an awareness of the unintentional role he had played in perpetuating a system that dismissed the struggles of individuals like her. He could only imagine the challenges she faced, balancing her commitments to her career, her community, and her own identity amidst a backdrop of a judicial system that could be both overtly and insidiously discriminatory. The dichotomy of his position and hers gnawed at him, and he recognized it not only as a personal conflict, but as a reflection of a broader societal issue that demanded introspection and accountability. In the silence that filled the courtroom, a realization took root within him, a call to action that urged him to confront his biases and the implications of his judgments moving forward. The weight of her gaze seemed to pierce through the facade he had constructed over the years, compelling him to examine the legacy he wished to leave behind. This awakening left him grappling with the question of how to wield his power responsibly, as he vowed to advocate for a more inclusive and equitable system of justice, not just for himself, but for every voice that had been stifled before him. The path ahead was unclear, yet he felt an unmistakable urgency to begin that journey, one step at a time. He called for a recess, the word escaping his lips in a croak that barely registered above the hum of the courtroom's tension. As the gavel struck the worn wooden desk, the sound reverberated through the air, but it was the silence that followed that struck him with more force, a heavy, expectant silence that wrapped around him like a shroud. The courtroom doors swung open and shut with a heavy thud, each closure resonating with the authority he was meant to embody, yet now left him grappling with a profound solitude. Alone, with only the dimming echoes of his voice and the faces of those who had come seeking justice, he retreated within his thoughts. He understood he had to confront her, the woman who stood on the other side of the courtroom's intricate dynamics. He needed to understand her perspective, to truly grasp her pain and story, rather than merely examining the case before him as a set of arguments and evidence. There was an unsettling truth festering within him, a recognition of his own implicit biases that had woven themselves into his judgment. Thoughts cascaded through his mind, battling against the fortress of authority he had erected around himself over the years. What awaited him outside the cool, imposing boundaries of the courtroom was not just a woman seeking justice, but a mirror reflecting the deep-seated flaws in his judicial armor, a reflection that would challenge everything he thought he knew about authority, impartiality, and the often distorted lens through which justice was served. As he stepped into the hallway, the world outside the courtroom became a blur of faces, an unending stream of expressions, each with its own narrative. A cacophony of whispers swirled around him, sharp and jagged, growing louder with every stride he took towards the exit. He could feel the weight of those stares, questioning, probing, dissecting his every move. There she was, standing at the threshold, poised with her hands clasped tightly before her, a striking figure of resilience and quiet strength amidst the chaos that swirled behind her. She had seen it all. The flicker of doubt in his eyes as he weighed the fine, and the tremble in his hand as he had reluctantly signed it. Each stroke of the pen a shackle binding him to a decision that felt increasingly unjust. In that moment, beneath the weighty robes of his office, he felt utterly bare, exposed. She knew his secret, the unspoken turmoil that lay just beneath the surface of his composed exterior, a truth he had not yet dared to articulate, even to himself. As he approached her, the gavel that hung heavy in his pocket now felt more like a weighty burden than a symbol of his power. It was a reminder of the responsibility he bore, one that he feared he had failed to uphold. The gravity of the moment settled over him like a cloak, every heartbeat a reminder of the uncomfortable reckoning that awaited him. In that charged liminal space, the threshold between the courtroom and the outside world, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for a conversation that would force him to confront not only her story, but also the broader narratives of justice, privilege, and the biases that colored his own perceptions. "Chief," he began, his voice barely above a murmur, filled with an uncertain weight that suggested the gravity of the conversation they were about to have. She raised an eyebrow, a question flickering in her eyes that seemed to encourage him to continue, to be brave enough to reveal whatever truth he carried inside. "I had no idea." His words trailed off, the admission spilling from him like a confession, revealing a vulnerability that hung in the air like a thick fog, obscuring the clarity of the moment. It was an acknowledgement of his ignorance, one that he had shielded himself from for far too long, one that now lingered palpably between them. The woman's expression remained unchanged, a mask of composed professionalism that he now realized concealed a maelstrom of emotions swirling just beneath the surface. Her stoicism held a power that was both intimidating and inspiring, a testament to the countless battles she had fought silently in a world that often misjudged her based on superficial criteria. "Judge Harper," she finally said, her voice measured and calm, unwavering despite the tumult beneath. "I'm aware of the assumptions that come with my skin color. I've faced them my entire career." Her words sliced through the defenses he had built, a scalpel of truth that laid bare the uncomfortable reality he had long chosen to ignore. The silence that ensued grew heavier around them, morphing into a palpable presence that filled the space, making it almost hard to breathe. The judge swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust, each gulp a reminder of the weight of their conversation. "How do we move forward from this?" he asked, his voice cracking under the pressure of this newly realized awareness that threatened to unravel all the certainties he had held. The chief of police regarded him for a moment, her gaze piercing and unyielding, as if she were searching for sincerity amid the layers of denial he wore like armor. "We start by acknowledging it," she replied steadily. "Only then can we begin to dismantle the systemic biases that plague our society." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a call to action, illuminating the path forward, but also revealing the daunting task ahead. The judge felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, as if he were being entrusted with a mission, a chance to confront the uncomfortable truths not only within himself, but also within the systems he had once taken for granted. The journey ahead would be arduous, but in this moment, he felt the first flickers of determination to stand against the currents that had long defined his world. Their conversation marked the inception of a profound journey toward understanding, a delicate dance of words fraught with tension and vulnerability. It was not just any ordinary discussion. It was a pivotal moment that would challenge Judge Harper's long-held perceptions and ultimately mold the trajectory of both his personal life and professional career. For the very first time in his enduring tenure on the bench, he found himself stepping down from his lofty pedestal, viewing the world through the eyes of those who had endured the weight of injustice cast by the very system he had served. This new perspective unveiled a reality that flooded him with a tumult of emotions, an amalgamation of anger at the injustices he had previously overlooked, and a renewed sense of resolve. It ignited within him a fierce determination to actively participate in the change he had once vowed to champion, recognizing that the role of a judge extended far beyond merely upholding the law. It required empathy, awareness, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, as the aftermath of their conversation rippled through the community, the media soon caught wind of the incident, catapulting the story into the public eye and transforming it into a local sensation. The picturesque town of Willowbrook, previously celebrated for its serene beauty and tranquil charm, now found itself at the epicenter of fervent discussions surrounding race, authority, and systemic bias. The judge's image, which had long been a symbol of order and justice within the community, was suddenly splashed across the front pages of newspapers and broadcasted on the screens of local news outlets. This visual representation served as a stark and undeniable reminder of the biases and inequities that lurked just below the polished surface of their quaint town, forcing residents to confront the uncomfortable realities of their society. As the town grappled with the revelations brought forth by the judge's newfound insight, conversations around dinner tables, community centers, and places of worship began to shift dramatically. People who had once been hesitant to broach topics of race and privilege were now engaging in dialogues that were both passionate and uncomfortable, reflecting a town in transformation. Judge Harper became an unintentional focal point of this awakening, a reluctant emblem of the societal need for change. This shift in perception, ignited by a simple yet profound exchange, heralded the beginning of a larger movement in Willowbrook, a community coming together to confront its past and forge a more inclusive future for all its residents. As weeks passed, the conversations continued to evolve, igniting a passion for social justice that permeated the community. Workshops were organized, forums sprung up, and for the first time, voices from marginalized groups found a platform. The delicate tapestry of Willowbrook began to weave together new threads of diversity, dialogue, and understanding as the folks began to acknowledge their shared humanity and the injustices that had previously persisted in silence. Judge Harper, embraced by his newfound purpose, began attending these events, eager to listen, learn, and contribute to the ongoing conversation. In doing so, he not only altered the course of his own life, but also inspired a wave of change throughout the town, a testament to the power of compassionate dialogue and the potential for growth that exists within us all. The judge's colleagues found themselves divided in their opinions, creating a palpable tension among them. Some colleagues extended their sympathy to him, relating their own uncomfortable moments of realization, moments when they had been forced to confront the uncomfortable truths about their beliefs and actions. They shared stories of their own missteps and the gradual awakening that followed, fostering a sense of solidarity that tempered the air of discontent. However, in stark contrast, there were those who clung fervently to their denial, their refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing or bias. Their resistance was unsettling, depicting a familiar yet distressing cycle of avoidance that struck Judge Harper deeply. His friends and family, too, had varied reactions to his growing self-awareness. Some expressed defensive indignation, their loyalty to him clouding their ability to accept the harsh realities he was beginning to embrace. Others took a more introspective stance, reflecting on their own beliefs and behaviors in ways that prompted deeper conversations and poignant exchanges. The dialogues that ensued were often fraught with emotion, each utterance a careful navigation through a minefield filled with the remnants of pride, cultural implications, and long-standing prejudices. Judge Harper listened intently, trying to decipher the underlying fears and frustrations that colored each perspective. Yet, amidst the cacophony of conflicting voices, Judge Harper remained unyielding in his commitment to self-examination. He recognized the importance of delving into his biases rather than avoiding them. To deepen his understanding, he sought guidance from trusted mentors who had navigated similar paths of growth, leaning on their wisdom and insight to illuminate his blind spots. Additionally, he made it a priority to attend community forums where he listened to personal stories that resonated deeply with the silent challenge posed by the woman who had brought this issue to light. Each narrative unfolded like a thread, weaving together the complex tapestry of human experiences and struggles with inequity. Driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, he read voraciously, immersing himself in books that explored the intricate connections between race and the justice system. With each page he turned, his eyes widened with the revelations that emerged. Numerous historical injustices, systemic biases, and the realization that the very institutions meant to uphold justice were often complicit in perpetuating inequities. It was a heavy burden to bear, the weight of realization mingling with guilt, but he embraced it with a newfound sense of purpose. This journey of introspection and education began to transform him. Judge Harper started envisioning how he could leverage his position to effect change, not just within his personal practices, but also within the broader justice system. He began to advocate for reform, aimed at ensuring fairness and equity in all aspects of judicial proceedings. Despite the challenges ahead, he felt resolute, aware that true growth often came with discomfort, and committed to facing it head-on. The path was fraught with obstacles, but in embracing this journey, he aimed to become not just a better judge, but a more empathetic human being dedicated to justice for all. In the courtroom, he began to implement changes, small at first, but significant in their impact. It was a deliberate and conscientious effort on his part to foster a sense of empathy and connection within the justice system. He made it a point to learn the names of every person who appeared before him, regardless of their social status or the severity of their infraction. This simple act of recognition transformed the interaction, making it clear that he viewed each individual as more than just a case number or a fleeting presence in his courtroom. He listened more intently than ever before, his gaze searching the faces of the accused, striving to uncover the humanity that had once eluded him during the dark times of his earlier judicial tenure. Each furrowed brow, each downcast eye, and each quiver of a lip spoke volumes to him, conveying stories and struggles that breathed life into what were once faceless files. As he pursued this new approach, the whispers among the staff, attorneys, and courtroom attendees grew louder, circulating the notion that his methods were evolving. The shift was a transformation that had become palpable even to those who had previously doubted his capacity for change, and the atmosphere in the courtroom began to reflect a newfound sense of possibility and hope. His commitment to this change resonated throughout the room, as he engaged with the accused not only as a judge, but as a human being who understood the nuance of their circumstances. And through it all, Chief of Police Samira Taylor remained a constant presence, a steadfast figure in the courtroom, her demeanor a silent testament to the work that lay ahead in their community. Her grace and poise in the face of his previous ignorance had not only humbled him, but had ignited a spark within him, inspiring a desire to be better, to enact meaningful reform. The judge understood that the path ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges. The echoes of that fateful day, a day marked by a seemingly minor act of jaywalking that had spiraled into chaos, would follow him for the rest of his life. Memories of the turmoil that ensued loomed large in his mind, serving as constant reminders of the delicate balance between justice and compassion. But as he looked into her eyes, he found not accusation or disdain, but rather an invitation, a gentle urging to join her in the quest for a more just and equitable world. In that moment, he was filled with a renewed determination to align his vision of justice with the values of understanding and empathy. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, their alliance a beacon of hope in a town that had been profoundly shaken to its core. The lesson learned from a single act of minor misconduct had unfurled into a compelling narrative of redemption and growth, one that promised the possibility of healing a fractured community. And hand in hand, they began to forge a new path, one marked by compassion, understanding, and the unwavering belief that change, no matter how small, could ignite a revolution of justice. Judge Harper's journey was far from simple. It was fraught with challenges and profound resistance. Throughout his tenure, he encountered significant pushback from fellow judges and colleagues who were entrenched in traditional views of justice. Skepticism also seeped in from the media, which often scrutinized his decisions and questioned his integrity. In this tumultuous environment, the community of Willowbrook found itself deeply divided. On one side were those who championed his efforts, viewing them as a crucial step towards progress and a more equitable system. On the other side, many could not overlook his past transgressions and mistakes, branding him as a hypocrite and questioning his motivations. Yet, despite the turbulence surrounding him, Judge Harper remained resolute. He was fueled by a transformative realization, one that cultivated a profound sense of empathy within him and strengthened his resolve to dismantle the very structures of injustice he had once accepted as the norm. In his pursuit of change, he sought out town halls and community meetings, making it a point to engage with the very people his rulings affected. He spoke openly and honestly about his own biases and the profound need for reform, laying bare the inner workings of his mind and heart. As Judge Harper's narrative of transformation gained traction, it did not go unnoticed in Willowbrook. The town, which had once been a bastion of quiet complacency, began to awaken. A ripple effect coursed through the community as residents started to engage in meaningful conversations about justice and fairness. They began to confront the uncomfortable truths about the disparities that existed within their judicial system. The whispers of change gradually evolved into a clarion call, growing louder and more insistent with each passing day. In public forums, citizens began challenging long-held beliefs and assumptions. They recognized the inherent flaws in a system that often weighed heavily on individuals based on the color of their skin rather than the substance of their character. As discussions of justice gained momentum, the community began to coalesce around a shared goal: to ensure that the scales of justice reflected equity, compassion, and understanding for all individuals, regardless of their background. Judge Harper stood at the forefront of this movement, a living testament to the possibility of transformation and the power of collective action aimed at fostering a more just society. In the months that followed the pivotal incident, Judge Harper's courtroom underwent a remarkable transformation, evolving into a beacon of justice and fairness that other jurisdictions began to look to as a model. His rulings, once viewed as mere legal formalities, became emblematic of a deep commitment to fairness and transparency, reflecting a profound understanding of the human experiences that often lay behind the cases presented before him. His demeanor shifted in a way that resonated with those who found themselves in his courtroom. He became more empathetic, open, and approachable, fostering an atmosphere where all voices had the opportunity to be heard without fear of bias or prejudice. Recognizing the urgent need for change, Judge Harper forged a powerful partnership with Chief Taylor, a collaboration that was as unexpected as it was vital. Together, they embarked on an ambitious agenda to implement reforms designed to address the racial disparities deeply embedded in their town's legal system. They meticulously analyzed existing policies and sought input from community leaders, activists, and citizens alike, believing that genuine reform needed to be rooted in the voices of those most affected by systemic inequities. However, their path was not without obstacles. They faced the storm of public scrutiny that often accompanied efforts for change, as well as the slow, grinding inertia of institutional resistance that clung to old ways of thinking and operating. Many were reluctant to embrace the proposed reforms, fearing the loss of long-held privileges and power structures. Yet, despite these challenges, Judge Harper and Chief Taylor remained steadfast in their mission. Their resolve was strengthened by the understanding that they were part of a broader movement advocating for justice and equality, a realization that countless others shared their vision for a more equitable society. The incident that had brought this unlikely duo together had not only transformed Judge Harper, but had essentially ignited a powerful chain reaction that reverberated throughout the town's consciousness. It emerged as a catalyst for a long-overdue dialogue on race, justice, and community responsibility. No longer could issues of implicit bias be brushed aside. The community was forced to confront the uncomfortable truths about its own prejudices and the role each individual played in perpetuating systemic injustices. As Judge Harper and Chief Taylor stood side by side, they embodied the possibilities of unity and collaboration. They recognized that their partnership went beyond traditional roles. They were allies in a shared quest for justice. They understood that this effort was not merely a series of reforms to be enacted, but the initiation of a long and arduous journey toward lasting change. Yet, with each conversation sparked and each reform proposed, they felt a growing sense of hope. Together, they were determined to forge a new path for Willowbrook, a path that not only embraced tolerance, but aspired to cultivate genuine understanding and equality under the law. They envisioned a community where every person, regardless of their background, could feel safe and valued, and where justice was not a privilege, but a guaranteed right. As they looked out over the challenges ahead, they knew they had the strength to overcome them through cooperation, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to their shared principles. The town's initial shock and anger gradually gave way to a cautious optimism. People began to see their leaders not as untouchable figures of authority, but as flawed human beings capable of growth and change. The judge's candidness about his past mistakes and his commitment to learning from them had struck a chord with many. His willingness to engage in difficult conversations and his openness to criticism had earned him a newfound respect. Even from those who had once vilified him,